inherit. So I told you in the last time we took notes that when we're doing these activities and talking about fur color and so forth, for the most part, we simplify it a ton. There's pretty much no human trait that we can observe that follows these clear rules of there's two versions, one's dominant, one's recessive. Most traits in humans, most characteristics, are much more complicated. And this is about some of that. So, and the reason, for example, our eye color. Sometimes people simplify, they say brown eyes is dominant and light eyes is recessive. It's not really that simple though. There's actually several different genes that control our eye color. It is inherited from our parents, but you can't just do a simple Punnett square to figure out, okay, here's my parents' eye color, here's my eye color. It's just not that simple. It would be a good example, but it doesn't quite work that way. We have several genes in our DNA that give us our eye color. So it's more complex. And so when we say that something is inherited by multiple alleles, that's what we mean. I mean, it's not just one gene, dominant, recessive. There's more than one gene that determines that trait. Here's another example. Okay, these rabbits. Yes. Rabbit fur color is genetic, of course, but it's not just two versions. It's not like the example we just did, brown fur color or white fur color, okay? There's actually several different alleles for it. So that's why rabbit fur color can be very dark, like black. It can be completely white, or it can have these other in-between variations. That's because, as you see up here, there's at least 3 different genes in the rabbit's chromosomes that determine its fur color.
Chinchilla isn't a color.
Chinchilla, yeah, it is an animal, but it's also the name for that type of rabbit. Another example is human blood type.
Like A, B, C.
So yeah, what are the human blood types you might have?
Like
Positive.
You could be A. Well, there's positive and negative.
Isn't it O?
There's O,
A, B.
A, B.
C.
There's no C,
O negative.
and there's AB.
I said that.
Isn't there O negative?
Yeah. So there's actually our blood type. Okay, B, is actually determined by our genes. We inherit it from our parents, but there's actually 3 different versions of it. There's the A allele, there's the B allele, and then there's the I allele. And so which of those you inherit from your parents determines your blood type. It's a relatively simple example, but it's not just 2 versions. It's actually 3 versions. There's also traits that are called sex-linked. And sex-linked traits are interesting. Sex-linked traits are traits that are carried on the X chromosome. So on the X chromosome, there's a bunch of genes for different things. And if a gene is carried on the X chromosome, it's called sex-linked. And for sex-linked traits that are on the X chromosome, it's more common for males to have those conditions, especially if they're recessive, because they have just, how many X chromosomes does a man usually have? 1. They have an X and a Y typically. Females have typically 2 X chromosomes. And so for a male to get a disease that's caused by a recessive gene, like color blindness, they only need to inherit 1 of those genes. For a woman to get color blindness, she needs to inherit it from both parents. So it's less likely for women. And color blindness is an example. Color blindness is sex-linked. It affects men much more often than women because it's a recessive disease or disorder that's carried on the X chromosome. So it's easier for males to inherit one of those. There's different types of color blindness depending on which condition a person might have. But color blindness doesn't mean a person just like sees in black and white typically. It typically means they have difficulty distinguishing between different colors like reds and greens or red and blue color blindness. There's variation there. Some other sex-linked diseases are hemophilia. When a person's blood doesn't clot properly and they bleed excessively, that's also sex-linked. And if you learn this in world history or global history, in the royal families, you may have learned that the males in the royal families were more likely to inherit this sex-linked hemophilia than
Because
the
we're all
women.
inbred.
Partially because of inbreeding and marrying cousins and close relatives, that increases the chances that genetic diseases
You got a big
pop
shit.
up.
My dad has a color blindness, but it's not like a shame. Like it's he can sleep with him only, but it's
Yeah, and it is. It's fairly common. Color blindness does happen a fair amount, especially in men.
If I'm not mistaken, wasn't the real life inbred came to inbred?
I don't know.
There's been a lot of I've heard reports
Oh, yeah?
and recreations of what he looked like, and like do show him with some physical deformities.
Interesting.
he was
So-
I mean, it could have been inbred. I mean, I know lots
Oh,
of
yeah?
people were
Is
inbred.
that something you learned in like
you know,
just
Well, people in history. Not a lot of people are inbred today. There was one prince. I think Prince Philip. No, it wasn't Prince Philip. It was somebody.
Okay, last slide. And we're going to be using some of this tomorrow and Friday. We have a type of diagram that we sometimes use in genetic research. When scientists are trying to trace certain characteristics or diseases in a family, they might create this diagram that's called a pedigree chart or a pedigree diagram. Have you ever heard of that word, pedigree?
Oh, I heard of it. I think it did. I think I have it.
It is a dog food. It comes into play with dogs and horses. If you were to go, like, say, buy a purebred golden retriever,
Okay.
the breeder might give you a pedigree of that dog, which traces back
It's family
its
tree.
ancestry. It's like its family tree, so that you can be sure that this dog you're buying is purebred. Its parents, its grandparents were all also golden retrievers. It's done in horses as well. But anyway, it's done for humans sometimes. And the way these, you should be familiar with these diagrams. They're basically a family tree that shows certain traits and who has those traits and who doesn't. So the symbols that we use. We always use squares represent males. Circles represent females. What do you think it means if two people are connected side to side like this? Sort of.
They have babies.
They have children. Where are their children going to be?
On the bottom.
Below them. So this man and this woman, they had 1, 2, 3, 4 children. How many sons do they have?
3.
One, 2. And they had how many daughters? 1, 2. Is this their daughter?
No.
No. Is this their son?
No.
Who are those people?
They're the ones that they're married.
Yeah, they're the ones that these people had children with. And again, so this man and woman had how many children? 4?
Yep.
2 males, 2 females.
Wild.
We also shade in certain colors. typically, if we're talking about a trait or a disease, we shade in whichever person had that trait. So if we're tracing, for example, Huntington's disease through a family tree, we would shade in all of the individuals that had Huntington's disease. All right. We'll practice with these as well in the next couple days. Any questions about a pedigree diagram?
No.
All right. We'll stop there.
Okay, cool.